Welcome to this very special session of the book club for the Ultimate Deployment Guide. I'm Lizanne Lightfoot, also known as the Seasoned Spouse. So excited to be here with you this evening. We have a lot to cover today. We are going to be going through the most challenging and the most frustrating part of the book. So I promise you, if you hang in there for today, it gets a lot easier and a lot more fun from here. This session is actually one of the reasons I decided to host this book club. I know that this deployment guide is super useful. I've gotten incredible feedback from families who have used it to prepare for deployment. But when they hit those first couple pages where you have to fill out so much information, it seems a little overwhelming. And sometimes people think that's a great idea, and then they just don't do it. And then deployment rolls around and they just kind of have the book hidden in a drawer somewhere and they forget all about it. So I want you to get the most out of this resource. I want you to do everything that you can to get yourself ready for deployment and to make things go smoother and more calmly for you. So today we are going to be focusing on the first 3 pages of this book. Just 3, but it will take a little while to get through. The first one is emergency contact information. The second one is essential paperwork. And finally, we'll talk about things to do before deployment and immediately after they have left. So if you are in the early stages of preparing for a deployment, this is an incredibly important session for you. I hope that you'll listen all the way through to the end. But even if your service member has already deployed, don't be afraid, because there is a lot that you can use that is useful even when they've already gone. A lot of this will be helpful to you no matter what stage of deployment you are in, even if it's halfway through. Maybe you haven't needed these emergency numbers and information now, but you never know when you will. So before we get too far into it, I want to welcome those who are tuning in and thank you for coming to our evening session. We are hosting our sessions at different times of the day to try and accommodate people with working schedules and kids. I'm hoping that this might be a little quieter time of the day when you can sit down and focus. Grab your favorite beverage, get something comfortable, and let's spend some time together preparing for deployment. So before we talk about this first page with emergency contact info, I want to tell you a quick story about why it is so important. When we were preparing for my husband's last deployment, most previous deployment, I already had 4 children. We were stationed in California, and all of our family members were on the East Coast, so quite far away. We did not have too many friends locally because we had just recently arrived at that duty station. And it worried me that if something should happen to any of my kids or to me, that it would take almost a full day for the grandparents or an aunt or an uncle or an actual family member to show up at our location. With them being so far away, I didn't know what would happen in those in-between hours should I be in a car accident or suddenly get sick or suddenly not be able to take care of my children. My husband was on the other side of the world. It would probably take 2 days for him to come home, and it would take a full day for a family member to get there. So what would happen to the children who were very young in that in-between time? And that weight was just sitting on my shoulders, and it kind of felt like it was just harder to breathe when I thought about those types of emergency situations. And thankfully, I discovered 2 things. First of all, the military has considered that this is a possibility, that bad things can happen to the spouse and the kids who are back home on the home front. And the military has a paperwork that's called the Family Care Plan. You can fill that out before deployment, preferably, but if you didn't do it, you can fill it out during deployment. And it's a legal document that you file with the unit, and it tells them what is your care plan for your children or for your pets. I know people who have used it for pets. If someone is going to be left alone in an empty house, then you would want the emergency first responders or police or whoever it is that's responding to your emergency. You'd want them to contact the unit. The unit would have this plan in place, and they would know exactly who to call, who to come over and take care of your kids, who else has a key to the house, who could feed the dogs and give them their medicine and do all the things that are necessary before you're able to return to your home. And honestly, once I found that out and I filled it out, it felt like this incredible weight had been lifted from my shoulders. And I realized the amount of stress and anxiety and just emotional frustration that I had been putting myself through, imagining these potential fake emergency scenarios. And I realized if one piece of paperwork could bring me that much confidence and calmness, then what else could I do to prepare myself to feel better about deployment? And I realized that all I had to do was face every possible emergency situation, face those situations that I was so scared of and so intimidated by, and look at them and figure out ahead of time, what would I do? Who would I call? And that became an incredibly freeing exercise because I could do it in a safe, calm place, not in a place of panic. There was no actual emergency. So I could sit down and work it out on paper and talk to my husband and take the time to say, oh, I would probably want to call my neighbor, but you know what? I've never actually asked her phone number. We're just Facebook friends and we always talk on Facebook. So it would give me that opportunity to go to my neighbor's house and actually get her phone number. And when I started walking myself through those scenarios and collecting those phone numbers and filling out the paperwork that I needed to, I realized that I now had the ability and the confidence to face those emergencies. No matter what was going to happen, I was prepared. And that, my friend, that is a great feeling when you are facing deployment. Deployment is full of uncertainty. There are so many questions that you can't answer and your service member can't answer, and I may not be able to answer. You don't know what to expect. You don't know what's going to go wrong. So you can either live the months before deployment in dread, feeling uncertain, feeling, how am I going to face this? What am I going to do? Or you can face those situations, face those challenges in your mind and work it out on paper. What would I do? Who would I call? And once you've done that, you have power over that emergency. It's no longer wearing at your mind. It's no longer keeping you awake at night. You've already addressed it and dealt with it. So if it does come up, you can just go through the steps, go through what you've already done, and you're ready to face it. So that is why we are taking the time tonight to look at these emergency contact numbers. And if you have questions as we go along, please feel free to ask them in the comments. I'm happy to respond to them live. But the very first number that I put on here for you, this one is not a blank. I wrote it out for you. It's the Red Cross emergency phone number. And if you're not familiar with this, the Red Cross has a program which has existed for years where they can relay emergency messages to deployed troops. And they can do this even when you don't have communication lines to your service member, even when the unit is in a remote location, even when they are going through a communication blackout. The Red Cross has approved communication channels where they can get directly to the unit leadership. There's directions further on in the guide telling you how to make a Red Cross message. There is some information that you need to gather ahead of time. But for now, I just want you to know that that number is available to you at any time. So it's not for, anytime you feel like getting a hold of your service member. It is for actual specific emergencies. For example, if you are admitted to a hospital, then the medical personnel can help you call this and approve a message to get to your service member. If an immediate family member dies, if it's either the service member's parents or if they were raised by their grandparents in place of their parents, they can send a Red Cross message for that. And the reason this is still important, even in the days of cell phones and instant messaging, is that sometimes the military unit will request a Red Cross message before they can approve emergency leave for a service member. So even if you might have told your service member on the phone, hey, here's the situation, here's what's happening, the service member can go and show that text message to their supervisors, but that might not be enough to get them leave. So you can use this Red Cross message. I've only had to use it when I was in the hospital delivering a baby, but it is wonderful to know that that line of communication is available so that if something happens, you're never truly out of touch from your service member. The next one is blank because this is for you to find out and fill in. This is a phone number for the military unit. Now, you can ask your service member what would be the correct number to use. Maybe it's the Family Readiness Officer, or the Army uses the FRG, Family Readiness Group. It might be that family communication person would be the first one you would reach out to get official information from the unit. This is probably not going to be your service member's, supervisor's cell phone number. It's more like an official number to communicate about family issues. But every unit has one, even National Guard, even Reserve. There's someone who's supposed to be your contact. And it's supposed to be the service member's job to get that number for you. Maybe you don't have it yet. So this is a good time to ask your service member, find out who you're supposed to contact if you have questions about the unit. This could be for pay situations, if the service member's pay gets messed up. If there's a minor issue going on with your family, we're not talking Red Cross emergency, but just something where you need feedback or legal assistance or paperwork help from the unit, there should be a number that you can call. I also put a separate line for that FRG, Family Readiness Officer. That is in case it's a different number for family readiness activities specifically. The next section, this is for you also to collect. This is your local friends and neighbors. And I found that so often we fall into the trap of just friending people on social media, and we might have entire conversations and have, entire friendships with people, and maybe we see them in person all the time. They live right down the street, or they have kids at our children's school. So we feel like we know them, we see them, but if you actually have to get a hold of them, do you have their phone number saved in your phone? Does anyone actually make phone calls to their friends anymore? So I realized that I had to be proactive and just reach out to people and have that awkward conversation. Say, hey, I never asked you for your phone number. Can I get that? You want to have at least one neighbor, because guess what? Sometimes people lock themselves out of their house and your neighbor might be able to help you out. You might need to leave something with them or ask them to grab a package off your porch. The situations are endless. But have a neighbor's phone number, and then also have a number for at least one person from each of your children's classes. So I have kids that are at different schools, and especially when they were younger, I needed to have at least one parent in each classroom that I knew the parent, my child knew them, that I was comfortable. If I was running late or something was happening, I knew I could reach out to that person and have them pick up my child from school. And their name also has to be on the school's records for an approved person to pick up your child. So make sure that you not only write their name here, but that you've contacted the school to let them know that they are an approved pickup person as well. There's also a place for phone numbers for a babysitter. Maybe you have a regular one, maybe you don't. Sometimes when I'm new to a duty station, it takes me a while to find a babysitter that I can trust. But if I don't have a single person I can call to watch my kids for an hour, if I need to go to a doctor's appointment, or just to go grocery shopping by myself, it's so important to have at least someone that you can call up. I wrote down family members because, of course, we have our own family members in our phones already, but sometimes you forget to get phone numbers for your spouse's family members. And then the service member leaves and you realize you have no way to contact people in their family except through social media, which maybe they use and maybe they don't. So check with your service member ahead of time and have that conversation. Hey, is there anything that you want me to update your mom or your dad or your grandparents about? And if you want me to give them updates about your deployment, what would be the best way to contact them? Find that out ahead of time. It will save you a lot of headaches. There's a line to write down: emergency maintenance. If you live on base, you are lucky-ish because your emergency maintenance needs are supposed to be covered and taken care of. I realize they don't always respond as quickly as we would like, but it is free and it's included in military housing. If you live off base, if you're a homeowner, then you're responsible for maintenance issues and you need to think through that ahead of time. Even with a brand new home, I've had a brand new home before that had, the toilet leaked and random things went wrong, appliances broke, and I was responsible for all of that on my own. So have a phone number of either a trusted friend or a trusted friend's spouse that has a great set of tools, a local handyman, or someone that you've worked with before and that you approve to come and take care of things on your property when they go wrong. Have that number there so that when water starts leaking and things are exploding and you've got problems in the house, that you don't need to be worrying about looking through Angie's List and trying to find a number at that emergency moment. Same with your doctor and your pediatrician. It's sometimes hard to get an appointment, so look up an urgent care place near you as well. Know where it is, because I once freaked out about trying to figure out where to take my child to urgent care when we were brand new at a duty station. I didn't know where I was or where any of the doctor's offices were. And it turns out that there was an urgent care place 5 minutes down the road. So I really didn't need to be worked up and worried and frustrated about it. Write down your service member's deployment address. Yes, this is the one that you'll be using to send the care packages, to send them letters if you choose. But every now and then, family members might ask, they want to send a care package and they want that address. And you have to have it written down somewhere that you're not going to forget about it. But also remember that that is a secure piece of information, just for the service member's security. You should not be posting that online. You should not be giving it out in a public manner. And finally, your service member's social security number. I know that most spouses, after you've been around for a while, you get that number memorized because you need your service member's security number, social security number, to do everything on base. But if you haven't memorized it yet, make sure that you write it down, because I promise you will be asked at some point during deployment, filling out some piece of paperwork or even trying to schedule a doctor's appointment on base. They will ask you for that, and you need to be able to read it or rattle it off. And the column on this side of the page, this is for more of natural disaster type of emergencies, because you know what? Some of our duty stations are in places where there are hurricanes or tornadoes or floods. And if you haven't lived through that environment before, you need to ask yourself ahead of time, where would we evacuate to? If we don't have any family nearby, what is the safe evacuation area for us? What is our plan? How much money do I need to have saved to make that happen? If we're going to stay at a hotel for a couple days to get, inland from a hurricane or to get out of a flood zone, these are things that you would want to have with you in case you lose power. And it's really important to think through that. Have these things in your garage or in a closet in your house. These should all be non-perishable, so you don't have to think about them too much once you put that emergency kit together. You make sure that the batteries are charged and things are there. But it takes off so much weight from your mind when you realize that you are prepared. I was on one duty station during a deployment when there were forest fires. This was in California. They have a wildfire issue every year. And even though we were in between LA and San Diego, so a fairly populated area of Southern California, there were still some wildfires that broke out right next to the base, and there were families that had to evacuate overnight. And they were throwing things into their cars, trying to remember, what do I need to grab from the house that's the most important, that I don't want to lose. And it was so sad to see this happening during a deployment when people are trying to figure out what would be important to the service member when they're not even around to ask. So if you think through those things in your head ahead of time, or even have that conversation with your service member, it just makes everything so much calmer and so much easier if you do get faced with that incredibly frustrating natural disaster situation. I'm sure I will tell you my story some other time of going through a hurricane during a deployment, when I was also giving birth during the hurricane, during the deployment. And I can tell you that the more preparation that you do, the better you're able to face those situations. So I will pause for a moment there. If anyone has questions about the emergency contact info page, let me know what your questions are. If you're having trouble figuring out where to find any of those numbers, I can clarify that. But remember, this is for you. The reason this is blank is because I want you to personalize this. You're supposed to be able to write on these pages. And if you've gotten the printable, the digital version, feel free to print those out. You can put them into plastic sheet protectors and then write on them with a dry erase marker. And that way you can always wipe it off and change it and use it again for your next deployment. I don't mind if you reuse the Ultimate Deployment Guide. What I want is for you to get the most out of it. So this is an incredibly helpful list for you. I hope that your military unit is also giving you some information. Hopefully they're giving you some local phone numbers and telling you what some of the emergency contacts would be for your local area. I don't think that this should be, contradicting anything that your military unit is giving you. And certainly I have to give the caveat that my information does not trump anything that's coming from official military sources. So if they're giving you packets of information, absolutely go through those packets and look at the official information first. But they probably are not remembering to tell you to get a babysitter's phone number or to write down numbers of your service members' family members. So just think through these things and let it be a supplement to any of the information that your unit is giving you. All right. Well, with that, we're going to move on to the next page. This is the page on essential paperwork. And this is the big question that everyone has before deployment. They know that they need paperwork. They know that the paperwork is important, but they're just not sure what paperwork it is and where to find it and what you're supposed to do with it. So I see this question all the time, and that's why we have this page in the deployment guide. So the essential paperwork, first of all, I made a note at the top that this should all be kept together in one place. Again, if you have the digital version of this and you've printed out the digital pages, feel free to clip them together into a 3-ring binder or into, any kind of folder. If it has pockets to store additional documents, then that is a great place to keep this paperwork so that it is all in one place. Because the tricky thing about this paperwork is that you might not need it for the entire deployment. It's quite possible that you'll get through all scenarios and not need it. But there will come probably that one moment where you need that one piece of paper and the bank will not talk to you without it, or the tax people will not process things without it. Or if you can't provide your spouse's signature on a power of attorney, then you can't progress with these plans that you had made. So you might not need it, but that moment when it becomes important, you want to have quick access. So during my husband's deployments, I definitely keep everything in one folder in a specific place in our house. And that way, when things come up, if I can't remember now, I remember him signing that power of attorney. Where did I put it? Well, I only have to look in one place. It's going to be in that official folder. And the same with his orders and the same with everything else that's on this list. So let's talk about those power of attorneys, okay? I know that you have heard about this somewhere along the line. Hopefully you already have one in hand, especially if your service member is already deployed. The military units are usually pretty good about getting out this information. You do need some type of power of attorney when your service member is gone. And this is especially important for spouses. Now, if you are just dating your service member, even if you're living together, even if you consider yourselves a married couple and all of that, if you aren't legally and officially married, then the power of attorney becomes a little bit less necessary. However, the service member has to give a power of attorney to someone. So if they haven't given it to you, they probably named one of their parents or whoever was responsible for raising them as their power of attorney. And the reason that's important is because no one can pay bills, renew a driver's license or a vehicle registration, or purchase anything in the service member's name, or open a bank account or withdraw from a bank account. You can't do any of those things if you don't have a signed power of attorney from the service member. And so what that does is it is a document that they fill out ahead of time saying that they approve a particularly named person, so you in this situation, the service member is approving you to carry out specific legal actions on their behalf. Now, a general power of attorney it's like it sounds. It's a general legal document. It can be helpful in some situations, but honestly, in recent years, it has become almost useless because most banks and, DMVs, vehicle registrations, licensing and military ID centers and places like that, they all want a more specific document, which is called the specific power of attorney. And the reason that one is specific is because it actually has specific boxes that the service member can check or not check. Do they have permission to enter a child into DEERS in my name during a deployment? Well, if you are pregnant when your service member deploys, you need them to check that box. Otherwise, you can't get the baby into the DEERS and the insurance program until the service member returns. So you need a specific power of attorney. But what if you don't know that you're pregnant when the service member leaves? You still might want to have that specific power of attorney with that box checked just in case. It doesn't hurt for them to check the boxes and then never need the document. My husband always says it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. So we always get a specific power of attorney. He always checks all the boxes for me. Of course, we've been married a long time. We have children together. There are a lot of things that I need to take care of in his name. This does depend on your relationship and whether you have shared bank accounts, both of your names on a vehicle, both of your names on registrations and things like that. But the more specific power of attorney that you have, the more useful it will be. And we even found that it was important to send copies to the banks ahead of time, because we've run into issues where even during a deployment, trying to show a bank that I had a specific power of attorney, they wouldn't count that paperwork because it wasn't coming from the service member. I'm not sure what the reasoning for that is, but their expectation was that it be filed by the service member before he deployed, because my name wasn't on this exact bank account and I was trying to file and ask for some tax documents, so I needed access to it, and they would not give them to me without his express written permission, which comes from a specific power of attorney. So do yourself a favor, save yourself some headaches, and get that to the bank ahead of time so there will be no questions or confusion. And then keep your original power of attorney in a safe place, like with this book or in a binder with this information. That way you don't lose it and forget where you put it 4 months down the road when you suddenly need it. So there's probably tons more that can be said about power of attorney. If you have questions about that, let me know. But we are going to move on to some of the other topics. These are a little bit more straightforward, but conversations that you need to have with your service member. You do need to talk about the service member's will. They usually are required to fill out a will with their unit before they deploy. It's part of the standard legal proceedings. It's taken care of by the legal office on base, so they shouldn't have to be going off base. They shouldn't have to pay out of pocket for a lawyer to sign a will. That should all be able to be done through their military unit. If you are making a will for yourself as the spouse or the dependent, you can ask if you're allowed to go through the base legal office, depending on where you are and what kind of services they have. They might be able to process one for you. You can make an appointment with them, or they might refer you to a lawyer off base to do that. I know it's not fun. It's not easy to talk about a will and to talk about things that can happen during deployment, but it is reality. And the reality is that hopefully you won't need that legal document. Hopefully you can just get rid of it once they return safely and in one piece. But for a very, very small percentage of families, that becomes an important document that they need during the deployment. So you want to know where it is. You want to have everything in order and with the service member's signature on it. The same with their life insurance plan. The service members are opted into a service member life insurance plan. It appears on their paycheck, on their LES pay stub. So you can talk together about what level of insurance they have, but there is an option to pay a little bit extra into it and to have a much higher life insurance premium. During a combat deployment, for example, that's often a good choice to make. It's not a very high cost to pay into it, but it can be a huge benefit to get that back. So have that discussion with your service member. They often don't want to fill out extra paperwork through their unit. They have a lot on their minds leading up to deployment. But these are conversations that you have to have that are very important to both of you. Here's that family care plan, and that's what I mentioned earlier. This is the plan that can be used for anyone that has kids, anyone that they are responsible for, and I've even heard of people using it for their pets. If something happens to you, the spouse, the dependent, when your service member is away during deployment, you need to have a family care plan of who would be the emergency people to take care of your children, your pets, whoever you're responsible for, while you are either incapacitated at the hospital, recovering from a car accident, or in the police office if you are arrested for some reason. Things can happen during deployment and things can happen out of our control. So it's great to have that family care plan filled out, file a copy with your service member's unit. You can do that through the Family Center, or you can do it through their unit admin office. And that way, when the emergency responders call the unit and contact the military unit, they'll have all your information right there, and they'll have someone in the local area that is approved to take care of your children or to take care of your pets and handle that for you. You also want to make sure that the service member has updated their emergency form. I think this has different names in the different units. The Marine Corps calls it the RED form, the Record of Emergency Data, which I learned that is not applicable to all the other units. So I just wrote, or all the other branches. So I just wrote emergency form. And basically that is the emergency contact for who the service member has designated to receive information if something happens to them during the deployment. Now, you'd think it's a no-brainer. Of course, it's your name that's going to be on there. You're the one that's going to get the information. But the problem is that when your service member first went away to basic training or to boot camp, they probably put their parents down on that record of emergency data, and their parents' address and phone number was listed on that. Well, if they haven't updated it all this time that they've been in service, then maybe your name isn't there. It doesn't appear automatically. The service member actually has to log in and put in your information. And maybe your address has changed. Maybe you updated your cell phone. So make sure that that emergency contact form is updated, and that is who the military will contact if there's an emergency where you need to be informed of your service member's conditions and whereabouts. Then there's a bunch of things that you need to check for yourself: your ID card, your driver's license, and your vehicle registration, and also your passport. All of those things, you might not need to do anything with them, but you do need to check their expiration dates. And the reason you do that before the service member leaves is in case you need their face or their signature or their appearance to renew those documents. For example, your military ID card, if you're married and a dependent and you have your own dependent ID card, it's difficult to renew that without the service member there, unless, of course, you have that specific power of attorney. So check your expiration date on your ID card, and if it is going to expire during the deployment, contact your base ID center and see if you can get that taken care of now. That way it won't catch you off guard and get you denied entry to base during the deployment. The same with your driver's license, your vehicle registration. If your service member's name is also on your vehicle, then you're going to need their signature somewhere on the form to renew those documents. And it becomes a real hassle trying to communicate with the DMV and explain that, well, they can't just sign this form. They're out of the country and I don't have access to them and they can't get it back in time. So save yourself that headache. Just get it taken care of now. It's also really important, this is in the middle of the page, to get a copy of the deployment orders. Okay, I can't tell you when these will come up because I've been asked for them at such random times, but I need to have in writing the official military orders that sent my service member overseas on deployment. I've used them for such random things, such as getting the cell phone suspended. There are laws that say that a cell phone company cannot charge a service member the cancellation fees and the suspension fees and all the additional fees that you'd usually have if they're out of the country on deployment orders. Well, guess what? They want proof of those orders. So if you have a copy, you can easily send that however the company is asking for it. It's also important for your lease. A company cannot cancel your lease or force you to pay out a lease if the service member is deployed. And that includes both your housing lease if you're renting an apartment and your car lease if you're renting a vehicle. So if you're getting a lot of hassle and a lot of problems with either a landlord or with the leasing company, then you can show them a copy of the service member's deployment orders and explain that they are not allowed to process this until the service member returns from overseas. So it's super useful to have them. They will come up at some point. I think you also need them when you're filing taxes, and that becomes a whole challenge when the service member is deployed. So just keep them on hand. You don't know when you might need them, but they're absolutely important to have. We already talked about the expiration dates. Check your passport as well, because if you haven't traveled out of the country recently, you might have forgotten that that has an expiration date. But again, especially for children, you cannot renew a child's passport without both legal guardians being present. And this is to prevent, kidnapping and taking children across country lines, which is a very important law, and I appreciate that. But when we were trying and talking about doing a cruise, my husband was deployed. I wanted to get passports for the kids. And again, without that specific power of attorney, I was not able to get passports for them. We had to wait for him to come back. So expiration dates are really important. And then finally, the last piece of paperwork that you need to have in your binder is all of the original birth certificates, marriage license, home and vehicle loans, and any other important documents. Again, this is not something that you need every day. No one has asked me for a copy of my marriage license for a while, but there are situations, legal situations, financial situations, where you have to produce those original documents. If you don't know where they are in a pinch, if your service member is usually the one that files those things away and they're in a stack of papers somewhere, then it's going to be a huge headache just to fill out one legal document or to process your taxes or to get a child entered into a program that they're supposed to be in. So if you get all of this together ahead of time, I know it seems daunting and overwhelming and frustrating, but I promise you it is worth it to deal with the headache and the hassle now, especially if your service member is still here and they can help you to sort through the papers, to find things. Maybe they have everything saved in a particular place and they can just show you where that is. That would be great. But get it organized for yourself, because when you have to handle everything on your own during a deployment, it is already challenging. It's already exhausting. You do not need any additional headaches and any other customer service person to tell you no. You just want to have this information at your fingertips so that when you don't get the right answer and you can't find the right form, that you just say, oh, well, I have this power of attorney. Will that help? And then hopefully the situation can be solved and the conversation can progress smoothly. So these are the most challenging and headache-filled pages in the Ultimate Deployment Guide. If you can take the time to sit down with your service member or even on your own, fill out those pages, collect your emergency contact phone numbers, and gather this paperwork, if you have done even these 2 pages, you are going to be so much more prepared for deployment and so much more confident in deployment emergencies than you thought possible. So this is the gift that you can give to yourself to help you build that confidence, to help you feel that, yes, I can get through this. Yes, I'm going to handle this deployment. So to continue, the final page that we're going to discuss tonight, this is the things to do before deployment and immediately after they have deployed. Again, if you have questions as I'm going along, please feel free to ask them. I want to be useful and helpful to you in your deployment situation. So everyone wants to know, what are all the things I need to take care of before deployment that aren't paperwork? Because again, the military unit probably gave you a good sense of this essential paperwork. Maybe they gave you a checklist kind of like this, telling you, hey, you need a power of attorney. Hey, you need a copy of his orders. Maybe they already gave you that. But the military unit is not thinking about managing your home while the service member is gone. They're only thinking about the legal and the financial situations. They're not really thinking about you and what you're going to do when your vehicle breaks down, or your laundry machine starts leaking, or your kid gets hurt. The military is not very supportive and helpful in those situations. So those are up to you. And again, there are steps that you can take before they even leave to give yourself some peace of mind, to give yourself some confidence, and to help you face those challenges before you even get to them. So to close up tonight's session, we are going to walk through a few more essential things that you should do. I know that your pre-deployment list feels long. I know that sometimes this just feels like one more thing to add, and it can be frustrating and it can definitely feel overwhelming, but that's why I'm here to help you out with it. You don't have to do it all at once. You don't have to sit down and do this all in one night. But again, the more that you do and take the time to talk about with your service member and take care of before the deployment, the smoother everything is going to go. I can't promise you a perfectly smooth and easy deployment, but I can say that doing these things ahead of time will definitely give you fewer headaches. It will make things happen a lot more automatically and easier, and it will help you handle any emergency situations that do pop up. So, first is deciding where to live. Now, we're going to have a whole other session where we talk about this because it's such a big decision. But just know, in case you're in those early stages and still trying to figure out what you're doing for deployment, some people prefer to stay put near the service member's duty station, which you can do whether you're married or not married. You can stay in that area if you have a good job or if you have a good support system. By all means, you can stay there without them. The service member, if you're married, will continue to get BAH, which is that basic allowance for housing, that will cover their wherever you were currently living, house, apartment, on-base house, whatever it was. But some people want to either downsize. Maybe you and your service member were renting a house, and if it's just you during the deployment, maybe you can do a studio apartment and save some money. If your rent is lower than their BAH, then you get to pocket the extra. So that might be a nice way to save money during deployment. Some people decide to go home and stay with family members during deployment. Now, this certainly has its own pros and cons, and that's why we'll talk about it in a whole other episode. But it can be a good option if you have a supportive family, if you have a good, strong relationship with them. Maybe you have very young children and you need some extra adults to help out. Maybe you still have a lot of friends or job possibilities in your hometown. By all means, go home during deployment, save the extra money by staying with family, and then you can move back to the service member's duty station when they're getting ready to come home. So there's a lot of ways that you can answer that question. There's no one right way. You need to talk to your service member, be honest about your own situation and your own family lifestyle and your relationship with your relatives. Be honest about those things and then decide what's going to work best for both of you. Sometimes the service member has an idea of where they think you should live, and that may or may not match your reality. So stand up for yourself and do what you need to do for yourself. You also need to plan vehicle storage. If the service member has their own vehicle and it's one that you do not need or cannot drive during the deployment, then discuss what should be done with that vehicle. If you have a garage, sure, it's fine to leave the service member's car in the garage. You do need to start it on a regular basis. We will talk some more about that, I think, in another session as well. But there's also the option, if it's a very long deployment, they might prefer to put it in a storage a paid storage place. Some of those are climate controlled. Some of those are better for storing vehicles. Maybe they want to lend it to a friend or a family member who would run it regularly. There's a lot of ways that you can handle it, or maybe you're going to be the one that's using their vehicle and driving it all the time. But just have that discussion. Next is write down all passwords. And that's why there's a whole page right here to do that. There are a lot of times during deployment when you will need to log into your service members' stuff. And again, it's hard to anticipate all of those needs ahead of time. You take it for granted that your service member has accounts, for example, they have their own Amazon account, and they have websites where they pay bills, and they have websites where they have a membership. Maybe it automatically renews to their credit card. They have a website where they're paying their credit card. And every couple has different ways that they handle finances, so I can't make assumptions about how you and your service member break out that responsibility. But I can tell you that there's a lot of times where one member of the family handles a lot more things than others. And if that is the service member, and then they go overseas and don't have internet access, suddenly it's the spouse at home that has to pay those bills, renew those subscriptions, handle all of those upgrades and downgrades of services. And it's very difficult to make changes to any of those accounts if, first of all, your name isn't on the account, and secondly, you don't have the login information and the passwords. So that's why there's a whole page here. Again, talk to your service member, figure out what sites they are comfortable giving you access to. Again, if you're married, it should be all of them. But if you don't have joint bank accounts, or maybe you're not married and you don't have everything shared yet, then there could be limits. Maybe they want you to pay, the credit card bill, but they don't want you to pay from their specific private account. Those are conversations that you need to have. And we will have a whole discussion on budget later. So you can ask me budget questions if you want, but I promise there's going to be another session to discuss deployment budgets. So that's why you need passwords. Again, you do need to discuss budgets. And I wrote here that you can plan out allotments. If you haven't heard of an allotment, that is basically a designated amount of pay that the service member can log into their military pay account and designate a certain amount to be allotted at the beginning of every month or from every paycheck. There's various ways that you can set it up. And that's super useful for paying recurring bills that have the exact same amount every month, maybe the cable bill or your cell phone bill if you're not going over on your data. Anything that they subscribe to regularly that they want to keep subscriptions going through deployment. If they set up an allotment, then that payment is automatically taken care of and neither one of you has to think of it. Some people also do this for things like child support or any type of recurring fees, mortgages, car loans, things like that. So you can set up an allotment. Some people choose to, some people don't. Just ask your service member what their preference is. The credit card is on here because it says alert credit card company to military travel. Unfortunately, when a service member typically uses their credit card in one particular area around the duty station, and then suddenly they travel overseas and start using their credit card at these international kiosks and in airports, well, that's a red flag for the credit card company, and they think the number has been stolen. And a lot of times they will shut down that credit card, basically cancel it, and you have to request a replacement or they'll change the numbers on you, which means now the service member who expected to have access to that credit line during deployment, now they don't have their credit card. So you can avoid all of that and avoid trying to get the new card shipped to the service member and all of those things by just calling the credit card company ahead of time and say, hey, we believe that he'll be deploying to Japan in, mid-June. We don't have an exact deployment date yet, but just understand that he's planning to travel to Japan in mid-June and he will be there for 6 months. So please do not shut down his credit card for purchases in Japan during that 6-month period. And they'll note it in his file so that if that red flag does come up, they'll see your note and they'll see the purchase and they will approve it, and then they won't have to have the whole cancellation fiasco. So that's an important phone call to make. You want to check your service member's wallet for the correct cards. I can't tell you how many families have reported that they sat down, had all these conversations about budgets, decided who was going to use which credit cards and which bank accounts during deployment, and then their service member left with all of the access cards in their wallet. They forgot to distribute the ones to the spouse, or they accidentally took the credit card but forgot to bring the debit card, and the debit card is what you expected them to use. So make sure that when you have these conversations that the correct cards go into their wallet and that they don't have things like your keys or anything that you are going to need during the deployment. I've had spouses report that for whatever reason the service member was carrying the dependent's military ID, getting ready for deployment. They had to go onto base and they had both ID cards. Well, both ID cards ended up in the service member's wallet, and then they deployed, which meant that the spouse now had no ID card. So avoid that situation and just double check that they have the right things at the right time. It's really smart to make a spare set of keys for your home and for your car. People do lock themselves out. It happens. So make a spare set, and you can either keep it somewhere hidden on your property, use one of those little hide-a-key things, or give a spare set to a trusted neighbor and say, hey, this is just in case, if I lock myself out, can I give you a call and you can come over and let me in? You can also go ahead and order your care package materials ahead of time. This is not exactly essential, but this will just easier and it makes it more fun that then as soon as the service member leaves, you can begin preparing their initial care package. In fact, sometimes if they have the deployment address before they leave, you can even put that first care package together and send it before the service member leaves. because it probably takes a few weeks to get to that destination. So hopefully it'll be there around the same time that they arrive. So you can order free care package materials through the USPS website, and that is listed later in the deployment guide. You definitely want to talk about communication options with your spouse. I think this is something else that could probably be a whole separate conversation and discussion. But every couple has different ways to handle communication during deployment, and it's best to be honest about those in advance. So some people prefer to have as many text messages every day as possible, but in other situations, that's just not realistic. So you need to know, will your service member have access to video calls? Can you do regular video calls? Do you need to download some special apps and make sure that those apps communicate with each other before they leave? Are you going to be suspending their cell phone? Because sometimes those international plans are horrendously expensive. So it might make sense to cancel the wireless service and then just use apps on Wi-Fi to either make video calls or send messages. There's a lot of ways you can handle deployment communication. Everyone has their own preferred method, but you need to have that conversation and make sure that you get on the same page. If they are expecting that you're going to be waiting up every single night for their phone call, that's going to get old very quickly. You're going to get very tired and cranky, and it's just not a realistic way to live your next few months or year. So be realistic about what times you can communicate, how often you plan to communicate, and what types of things you want to check in with each other about. Sometimes deployment can kind of feel like Groundhog Day, where it's just the same thing again and again, and the service member might feel like they have nothing new to report, nothing to say, and they might really not feel like talking that day. That doesn't mean anything for you personally. It doesn't mean that you're boring. It doesn't mean that you have a bad relationship. They just might not be interested in checking in when they feel like there's nothing new to report. So get on the same page about communication. And then the final box here, this is also for fun, but also for your own peace of mind. Plan yourself a date night or several date nights and plan some family photos before they leave. It is so important that in the midst of all this checklists and to-do things and errands, it's a lot to process before deployment. So plan some fun time and some good memories that you can both treasure. Make sure that you take pictures, that you save little videos in your phone of just everyday moments, because you will find yourself looking through those pictures and those videos again and again while they're gone. So the more that you can take, the more that you'll have to treasure during the deployment. Now, the week after deployment, or any time shortly after they deploy, is when you would do this next section. And these are really important because a lot of these items will save you money, and some of them will save you some headaches during deployment. So the first thing you can do is adjust the car insurance. If the service member is not going to be around for a few months, they are not going to be driving the vehicles, and it may be possible to take them off of the policy as a driver. Now, you need to talk to your company about this because sometimes there's a penalty for an individual having a gap in their insurance coverage, and some companies will list them as a non-driver instead. It's still cheaper because anything that they have on their record is not being charged on the policy, but make sure that you get the wording straight and don't just automatically revoke it. You can also adjust your cell phone and cable bills. Maybe you're canceling the service member's cell phone, and remember that you should not be charged a fee to do that. You can suspend their line so that they keep their same phone number, and it just needs to be restarted once they return from deployment. You can also reduce your data plan. If before there was several of you, you, your spouse, and your kids all using the same cell phone plan, well, maybe now that the service member is off the plan, you can reduce that data usage. You can also change your cable plan, your subscription, whether you're using Hulu or Netflix or Amazon or Disney Plus or sports packages. There could be something that the service member was subscribing to, that they were the only ones in the family using. Well, if that sports plan is going to go unused during deployment, there's no need to keep paying for it every month. The same can be said for any other subscriptions. Of course, you want to ask your service members permission. Don't just go canceling everything that they've ever subscribed to. But if there is a gym membership that they won't be using, or, any other plan that they are getting things delivered to the house or a service that they won't be able to take advantage of, then make sure that you call those companies and suspend them. It's wise to go through your credit card bill after the service member has left and just look at the items that were charged in the past month, and then ask yourself which ones of these will be repeating and which ones of these don't need to repeat when my service member is gone. And then just go ahead and call those companies because their numbers are usually listed right on the bill. Next, you can start preparing for your first care package. It's a fun activity. Most people look forward to that. They enjoy it. It's something that can kind of lift you up during that first week when you're struggling. But use those materials that you ordered from the post office before deployment began. Go ahead and get the things to fill up the first care package. Maybe there's an item that they forgot. So sometimes I hold off until my husband has gotten in country, and then he can request, oh, I need extra socks. One time he forgot his running shoes because he did pack them, to his credit, but our toddler came over to his bag and took them out of the bag and moved them back into the shoe closet. So he thought he had packed his shoes, and he found out after he arrived in country that he did not. So I had to send them in a care package. So get that first care package ready for them. Give yourselves both something to look forward to. Next, it says to set a goal for yourself. I find that this is something that can be really motivating in those first few weeks of deployment when all of deployment is kind of stretching ahead of you. You need to have positive things to look forward to. And some people set really big goals. Maybe you're using this deployment to take a class or to start a new job or to train for a marathon or do something huge. That's awesome. But some people use deployment for much smaller goals. And so I like to set either weekly or monthly goals, something to kind of keep me moving, keep me motivated and encouraged, but not something that's so overwhelming, like I'm going to lose 50 pounds. That takes a long, long time to do. So, and it might not even be healthy for many people. So set yourself some realistic goals. Again, we're going to have a whole other session later in the month to talk about that, but it is something that you can do right after they deploy. And finally, it is important to make some social plans with at least one person the week that the service member deploys. I find that for myself, especially that day that they leave, I usually want to have someone else to hang out with immediately after the deployment. I don't want to go back to an empty house. It's just upsetting. And so having some type of social thing to look forward to, maybe I'm just meeting a friend for coffee. Maybe the kids are grabbing ice cream somewhere. I know with COVID restrictions and social distancing, it's a little bit trickier than it used to be, but you can still meet people in safe public places, go for a walk, go to a park or a hike or some kind of outdoor space that's going to be refreshing and enjoyable, and just do something that's going to keep you calm and distracted for the rest of the day so that you don't have to be so in your feels about the deployment. So if you could do those things before and immediately after they have deployed, you will be setting yourself on a nice path of organization and confidence and peacefulness that hopefully that will carry you through most of the deployment journey. I'm sure there will be some ups and downs and bumps along the road, but that will get you off to the right start. So I know that has been a lot. I am so grateful for those who have listened through the whole thing. I hope that you paused and took some breaks if needed. But go ahead today or tomorrow, take the time to sit down with these pages and just write out your own information personally that will apply to your situation and really help you through the deployment. So it has been such an honor to start this deployment journey with you, to walk through this book with you. I hope that you are getting as much out of it as possible. Remember that the deployment guide, it is available either as the paperback version, which is the one I'm using here. This is sold on Amazon. It's also available as a digital download through my blog. Those links are both up at the top of this group, so it's easy to get to. They're both the same version, just some people prefer to print it out themselves and to have paper that they can just write on in a binder, and other people prefer to have it in a paperback book already printed out for them. So the choice is yours, but either way, it's a super useful resource. And I want to let you know that as long as this video has been And as informative as this video has been, I have a lot more deployment resources in my deployment masterclass. It is a collection of 12 video interviews, each one about this long, and each one is on one of the most commonly faced deployment challenges. So all of this, while we were talking about emergency preparation and getting your contact numbers and getting your paperwork in place, in the Deployment Masterclass, I have an interview with a Gold Star spouse who lost her service member during deployment. And of course, I don't want to dwell on that too much. I'm not trying to drag anyone down. But the reason I interviewed her is because she did face an incredible, challenging emergency. And it was years ago, so she's comfortable speaking about it. And the purpose of her session in the Deployment Masterclass is to help you see that you can face emergencies. You learn to lean on your network. You learn how to ask for help. There are things that you can do that will make some of those emergency decisions happen a little bit quicker and easier and smoother. That's why it's so important to get all this paperwork in place ahead of time. But she is kind of a success story to share the fact that, yes, we can face incredibly difficult moments during deployment and bad things can happen, but we are able to overcome them and move forward with the help of our community. So this is Krista Anderson that I'm talking about. She is featured in the Deployment Masterclass, and her interview is just one of, I think, 12 that we do with various military spouses on different topics related to deployment challenges. So it is kind of a complement. It's like a video training version of what's in the Ultimate Deployment Guide. This is like a workbook, but the Deployment Masterclass is expert interviews with military spouses who have been through multiple deployments. They know how to face the worst situations. They've made the mistakes. They've learned from them. And they really just want to help you go through your own deployment. So if you're interested in more information about the Deployment Masterclass, it's also available through my Seasoned Spouse website, seasonedspouse.com/deployment. You can find a whole description of all the speakers and the topics listed there. So I hope that you'll check that out and consider that as a supplement to your deployment planning resources. So this has been session 2 of our deployment book club, focusing on the emergency contact info, essential paperwork, and things to do before and right after the service member deploys. I hope that you've gotten a lot out of this session. As always, feel free to leave me your questions. I'm happy to answer them. And I am going to sign off and get some water for my parched throat. So thank you so much for tuning in with me this evening. I'm Lizanne Lightfoot, the Seasoned Spouse, and I'll be back for session 3 on Friday. We are going to be talking in the morning this time, so mixing up the schedule again, trying to figure out what works for all of you. And we will be talking about those next few pages in the book, focusing on making a budget, which is an important decision for every military household, and then the essential questions of home and car maintenance. So go ahead and look at those pages ahead of time. Let me know what your questions are, how I can help you, and I am here to walk with you on your deployment journey. Thanks so much. I'll see you next time.